"Eleanor, you need to see this." My friend Ruth handed me her phone at our Tuesday afternoon bridge club. On the screen was a Facebook event, Gala for the Forgotten Elderly, honoring Eleanor Washington. I stared at my own face looking back at me from the event photo. Not a recent picture. This was from 2008, right after my husband Robert died. I'd lost weight, stopped doing my hair, worn the same cardigan for weeks. I looked broken. Exactly the kind of image that would make wealthy donors open their checkbooks. "Your son posted this," Ruth said quietly. "He's raising money for you. Says you're living in poverty, can't afford medication, eating one meal a day." I scrolled through the event description. Brandon had written a heartbreaking story about his mother's decline. About how she refused help out of pride. About how she was too ashamed to ask her successful son for assistance. It was beautifully written, emotionally manipulative, and completely false. I lived in a comfortable 2-bedroom condo. I had excellent health insurance. My investment portfolio was worth $14 million. My son had no idea about the money. I'd kept it quiet after Robert died, wanting to see who'd stay in my life for me versus my wealth. Brandon had failed that test spectacularly. And now he was profiting from a fictional version of my poverty. I handed the phone back to Ruth. "How much are tickets?" $500 per person. I did the math. 200 guests meant $100,000 in ticket sales alone. Add silent auction items, direct donations, corporate sponsorships, and my son was probably raising close to $500,000. In my name. Without my permission. Using my pain as his profit center. "Ruth," I said calmly, "I need you to help me buy a ticket. Under a different name. And I'll need to borrow your wig. Before you judge me, let me tell you how I got here. If you're watching this, subscribe and let me know where you're watching from. Drop a comment and tell me if you've ever discovered a family member was lying about you. Your voice matters. Let me back up 3 years. That's when my relationship with Brandon started falling apart, though I didn't realize it at the time. After Robert died in 2008, I was lost. We'd been married 42 years. He was my best friend, my partner, my everything. When he had his heart attack at 9:15 a.m. on a Tuesday morning while reading the newspaper, part of me died with him. The grief was overwhelming. I stopped eating. Stopped sleeping. Wore the same clothes for days. My daughter-in-law Michelle took that photo Brandon was now using. She'd come over to check on me, found me crying in Robert's old cardigan, and snapped a picture saying she wanted to document my journey through grief. I thought she was being supportive. Now I realized she was collecting ammunition. It took me 2 years to climb out of that dark place. Therapy helped. So did my bridge club, my book group, and eventually, my financial advisor telling me I needed to start thinking about my future. That's when I discovered Robert's gift. He'd been investing quietly for decades. Tech stocks in the 90s. Real estate before the boom. By the time he died, our portfolio was worth $8 million. With proper management over the next decade, it grew to $14 million. I'd never told Brandon. Not because I wanted to keep secrets, but because I wanted to know if he'd love me when I had nothing. When I was just his mother, not his potential inheritance. The answer became clear pretty quickly. Brandon's visits dropped from weekly to monthly. Then every few months. His phone calls became shorter, always ending with some urgent excuse. "Sorry Mom, Michelle needs me. Got to run, work emergency. Can we talk later? I'm really busy." But I'd see him on social media, posting about luxury vacations, new cars, designer clothes, fancy restaurants. He wasn't too busy. He just didn't want to spend time with someone who couldn't advance his lifestyle. When I had surgery for a torn rotator cuff last year, Brandon visited once. For 20 minutes. Spent 15 of them on his phone. Michelle didn't come at all. My bridge club friends visited more than my own son. So when Ruth showed me that Facebook event, I wasn't surprised. I was devastated, but not surprised. Because this was vintage Brandon, finding a way to profit from my pain while looking like a hero. That evening, I called my lawyer Margaret Chen. We'd worked together since Robert died, and she'd helped me set up the investment trusts that kept my money private. Margaret, I need you to look into something. Brandon appears to be running a charity in my name. The Eleanor Washington Foundation, she said immediately. I saw the event posting. I was going to call you. You knew about this. I just found out this afternoon. Eleanor, there's more. Brandon filed paperwork establishing the foundation 6 months ago. It's a registered non-profit. He's been preparing this for a while. My hands were shaking. Can we stop it? We could file an injunction, but that would tip him off. And honestly, I think we have a better opportunity here. What kind of opportunity? Margaret's voice took on an edge I'd never heard before. The kind where we document everything he does, every lie he tells, every dollar he collects. Then we turn it all over to the authorities and let him face the consequences of fraud. I thought about my broken-looking photo being used to manipulate strangers. About Brandon telling people I was too proud to ask for help when he'd never once offered it. About him raising hundreds of thousands of dollars that would never reach anyone in need. What do I need to do? Buy a ticket. Attend the gala. Let him perform his show. I'll have someone there recording everything. When he makes his pitch, when he collects those donations, when he claims it's all for you, we'll have proof. And then we call the police. The next 2 weeks were strange. I went about my normal life while watching Brandon's event page grow. 200 confirmed guests. Corporate sponsors adding their logos. Brandon posting updates about how moved he was by everyone's generosity. Not once did he call me. Not once did he ask if I needed anything. He was too busy profiting from my fictional poverty. Ruth helped me prepare for the gala. We bought a wig, ash blonde instead of my silver grey. Different glasses. Makeup that changed my face shape. A dress I'd never normally wear. You look like a completely different person, Ruth said, studying me in the mirror. Good. Because Eleanor Washington is supposed to be home eating canned soup, not attending a $500 A-plate gala. The Grandview Hotel ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers, white roses on every table, a stage with professional lighting. My son had spared no expense. With other people's money, of course. I'd purchased my ticket under the name Sarah Mitchell, claiming to be a philanthropist interested in elderly care initiatives. The woman at the check-in table didn't look at me twice. Ruth met me inside. We'd bought seats at different tables to avoid suspicion. Margaret was there too, seated near the front with a small camera in her purse that looked like a phone. At 7 p.m., the lights dimmed. Brandon walked onto the stage in a tuxedo I knew cost at least $3,000. His wife Michelle followed in a gown that probably cost twice that. They looked like movie stars, not the struggling couple Brandon portrayed online. Good evening, everyone, Brandon began, his voice smooth and practiced. Thank you so much for being here tonight. Your presence means more than you know. Applause filled the room. Most of you know why we are gathered here. But for those who don't, let me tell you about someone very special. My mother, Eleanor Washington. The screen behind him lit up with photos. That 2008 photo of me in Robert's cardigan. Another one I didn't recognize, of an elderly woman in a rundown apartment. A third showing an empty refrigerator. None of those last two were actually me. My mother is 73 years old, Brandon continued, his voice catching with emotion. She lives alone in a small apartment with no heat, eating one meal a day because she can't afford more. Her medication costs force her to choose between prescriptions and food. I felt sick. Every word was a lie, delivered with perfect sincerity. She's too proud to ask for help. Too ashamed to admit she's struggling. And that shame, that pride, it's killing her slowly. A woman at my table was crying. Others were shaking their heads sadly. That's why Michelle and I started the Eleanor Washington Foundation. To help people like my mother. To provide heating assistance, food support, medication coverage, and basic human dignity to elderly people who've been forgotten by their families. The irony was almost funny. Brandon was describing himself, the family member who'd forgotten his mother. Tonight, we are asking you to open your hearts and your wallets. Every dollar you donate goes directly to helping seniors in need. Seniors like my mother. The audience applauded. Brandon wiped his eyes. Michelle hugged him supportively. We have a silent auction running all evening. Amazing prizes donated by generous local businesses. We also have pledge cards at your tables. Please, give what you can. Even $20 helps. He paused for effect. And if you're feeling particularly generous, we are accepting major donations that will go toward our goal of building an assisted living facility specifically for low-income elderly. A place where people like my mother can live with dignity and care. More applause. Brandon soaked it in like he was accepting an Oscar. Thank you all so much. Enjoy your dinner, bid generously on our auction items, and remember, tonight, you're changing lives. The lights came up. Waiters began serving the first course. At my table, people were already filling out pledge cards. What a wonderful young man, the woman next to me said. His mother must be so proud. I smiled tightly. I'm sure she is. Over dinner, I watched Brandon work the room like a politician. Shaking hands. Accepting condolences about his struggling mother. Thanking people for their generosity. He was brilliant at it. Charming, sympathetic, sincere. He passed within 3 feet of my table once. Looked right at me. Didn't recognize his own mother. By 9 p.m., the silent auction was closing. I wandered over to see the final bids. A weekend getaway package. Tickets to a Broadway show. A signed baseball. Everything legitimate. Donated by real businesses. Brandon had thought of every detail. Except one. He'd never anticipated that his mother might actually attend her own charity gala. At 9:30 p.m., Brandon took the stage again for the final fundraising push. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm overwhelmed by your generosity tonight. Between ticket sales, auction items, and direct donations, we've raised over $400,000. The room erupted in applause. People stood, cheering. This money will change lives. It will provide warmth for people who are cold. Food for people who are hungry. Medicine for people who are suffering. And it all started with one person, my mother Eleanor. He paused. I wish she could be here tonight to see this outpouring of love and support. But she's home, probably wearing that old cardigan, eating soup from a can, wondering if anyone remembers her. That's when I stood up. The applause was still going, so not everyone noticed at first. But the people at my table saw me rise. Then the table next to mine. A hush began spreading through the room like ripples in water. Brandon, I said, my voice carrying in the sudden quiet. Sweetie, I have a question. 300 heads turned toward me. Brandon squinted against the stage lights, trying to see who was speaking. Who's there? He asked, uncertainty creeping into his voice. I removed my glasses. Then my wig. Let my silver hair fall to my shoulders. It's me, sweetheart. Your mother. The one who's supposedly at home eating soup from a can. The room went completely silent. You could have heard a pin drop on the carpeted floor. Brandon's face cycled through confusion, recognition, and then pure terror in about 3 seconds. Mom? What are you doing here? I started walking toward the stage. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I'm here because apparently you're raising money in my name. For my poverty. My suffering. My struggle. I reached the stage stairs. I'm here because you told 300 people that I eat 1 meal a day and can't afford heat. Mom, let me explain. Please do. I climbed onto the stage. Stood next to my son, facing the audience. Explain to all these generous people how you've been collecting donations for a mother you haven't called in 6 months. A mother you visited once for 20 minutes after her surgery. A mother who apparently needs help you've never offered. Michelle tried to approach. Eleanor, you're confused. Brandon's trying to help you. Am I confused? I pulled out my phone, pulled up my bank app, turned the screen to face the audience. Because my bank account doesn't look confused. That's $14 million. Does that look like someone who can't afford food? Gasps filled the room. Brandon grabbed my arm. Mom, stop. You're ruining everything. Everything you built on lies. I shook him off. Everything you created by using my grief photos without permission? Everything funded by making me look pathetic and helpless. I turned back to the audience. Let me tell you what's really true. I live in a comfortable condo. I have excellent health insurance. I've never missed a meal. And I've certainly never asked my son for help, because he's never offered. Margaret stood up from her table. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm Margaret Chen, Mrs. Washington's attorney. Brandon Washington never had his mother's permission to use her name, her photos, or her story. The Eleanor Washington Foundation was established without her knowledge or consent. She pulled out documentation. Furthermore, an investigation into the foundation's finances shows that of the $400,000 raised tonight, less than 5% was designated for actual charitable work. The rest was allocated to administrative expenses, which include Mr. Washington's salary, his wife's salary, luxury office space, and personal expenses disguised as business costs. The room erupted. People shouting. Some demanding refunds. Others pulling out phones, presumably calling lawyers. Brandon tried to salvage it. That's not true. Mom, tell them. Tell them you knew about this. I knew. I looked at him with all the disappointment 7 decades of life could muster. Brandon, I found out about this 2 weeks ago when my friend showed me your Facebook post. You never asked permission. Never told me you were doing this. You just decided my grief photos and my name were worth more than my dignity. I was trying to help people. You were trying to help yourself. My voice cracked. You took the worst moment of my life and turned it into a profit center. You told strangers I was suffering while you bought $3,000 tuxedos. You made yourself into a hero for caring about a mother you barely speak to. Michelle stepped forward. We are building an assisted living facility. With what money? I interrupted. The money you raised fraudulently? The money people donated thinking it would help me. I turned to the audience. Has anyone here seen architectural plans? A building permit? Any evidence this facility exists? Silence. That's what I thought. I faced Brandon again. You created a charity based on lies. You raised money under false pretenses. You used my name without permission. And you did it all while ignoring your actual mother, who was doing just fine without your help. Someone in the back shouted, "Call the police." Already done, Margaret said calmly. They're waiting outside. Brandon went white. You can't be serious. Charity fraud is a federal crime, Margaret explained. You solicited donations based on false information. You misrepresented how funds would be used. And you did it all using your mother's identity without her consent. The ballroom doors opened. 2 police officers entered, followed by what looked like federal agents in suits. Brandon Washington, the lead agent said. I'm Agent Sarah Reeves with the FBI. You're under arrest for wire fraud, charity fraud, and identity theft. The next 10 minutes were chaos. Brandon being handcuffed. Michelle screaming. Guests demanding refunds. Photographers and phones capturing everything. My son being led out of his own charity gala in handcuffs. I stood on that stage and watched it all with a strange mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Ruth came up beside me. Are you okay? I don't know, I admitted. I just destroyed my son's life. No, she said firmly. He destroyed his own life. You just made sure there were consequences. Margaret joined us. The FBI will need a statement from you. But Eleanor, I want you to know something. We found evidence that Brandon's been doing this for years. Different charity schemes, different names. You weren't his first victim. You were just his most profitable one. That somehow made it worse and better at the same time. As the room cleared, the hotel manager approached. "Mrs. Washington, I'm so sorry. If we'd known." "You couldn't have known," I said tiredly. "My son is very good at lying." That night, I went home to my comfortable 2-bedroom condo. Made myself tea. Sat in Robert's old chair and cried for the first time since seeing that Facebook event. Not for Brandon. He'd made his choices and would face the consequences. I cried for the son I thought I'd raised. For the values I thought I'd taught him. For the relationship I thought we had but clearly never did. The next morning, the story was everywhere. Local philanthropist arrested for charity fraud. Son uses mother's identity for fake foundation. $400,000 scam exposed at Gala. Brandon's face was on every news site, usually the photo of him being led away in handcuffs. Michelle had already hired a lawyer and was claiming she knew nothing about the fraud. Classic. The FBI agent, Sarah Reeves, called me at 10 a.m. "Mrs. Washington, I wanted to update you. We've frozen all of the foundation's accounts. Donors will be able to file for refunds. And we've found evidence linking your son to at least 3 other fraudulent charities over the past 5 years. What happens to him now?" He's facing multiple federal charges. If convicted, he's looking at 15 to 20 years. 15 to 20 years. My son would be in his 60s when he got out. "Mrs. Washington, I need to ask. Why did you keep your wealth secret from your family?" I thought about how to answer that. Because I wanted to know who'd love me for me. Turns out, my son loved me more as a poverty case he could profit from than as a mother he should care for. I'm sorry. So am I. The trial took 8 months. Brandon pleaded not guilty, claiming he had every intention of helping elderly people and that the administrative costs were necessary expenses. His lawyer painted me as a vindictive mother who'd sabotaged her son's humanitarian work out of spite. The jury didn't buy it. They found him guilty on all counts. Wire fraud, charity fraud, identity theft, money laundering. The judge gave him 18 years with no possibility of parole for the first 10. Michelle divorced him 2 weeks after the verdict. She claimed the house, the cars, everything. Brandon had nothing left except a prison cell and the knowledge that his mother had been the one to put him there. I didn't attend the sentencing. Margaret represented me. But I did write a victim impact statement that the judge read aloud in court. My son didn't just steal money from generous people. He stole my story, my pain, my grief over losing my husband. He turned the worst moment of my life into entertainment for strangers. He made my suffering into his profit. And he did it all while pretending to be a loving son who cared about his struggling mother. The truth is, I wasn't struggling. But if I had been, he would never have helped me. He would have done exactly what he did, use my pain to make himself look good while pocketing the money. I hope prison teaches him something I clearly failed to teach him. Other people aren't tools for your benefit. They're human beings deserving of respect, honesty, and love. The judge cited my statement specifically when explaining the lengthy sentence. That was 2 years ago. I still live in my comfortable condo. I still go to Bridge Club on Tuesdays. I still have my $14 million, though I've started donating significant portions to legitimate charities that actually help elderly people. I started my own foundation, the Robert and Eleanor Washington Fund. We provide heating assistance, food support, and medication coverage for low-income seniors. Everything Brandon claimed his charity would do, we actually do. Last year, we helped 3,000 people. I named it after Robert and me because I wanted something good to come from our names. Something honest. Brandon writes me letters from prison. Long, rambling letters about how sorry he is, how he's changed, how he understands now what he did wrong. He wants me to fund his appeals. To hire better lawyers. To help him get out early. I don't respond. Not because I don't love him. I do. He's my son, and some part of me will always love him. But love doesn't mean enabling. It doesn't mean accepting abuse. And it doesn't mean pretending that 18 years in prison is too harsh for someone who stole $400,000 while claiming to help his suffering mother. Some people think I was too hard on him. That I should have warned him privately instead of exposing him publicly. That family should protect family. But here's what I learned. Brandon had been running variations of this scam for years. The charity fraud, the fake foundations, the emotional manipulation. If I'd confronted him privately, he would have apologized, promised to stop, and then found a different way to con different people. Public exposure was the only thing that stopped him permanently. And yes, it hurt. It still hurts. Watching your child being led away in handcuffs, knowing you caused it, that's a pain that doesn't fade. But it was necessary. Because more important than protecting my son was protecting his future victims. The people he would have scammed. The donors he would have manipulated. The causes he would have exploited. Sometimes love means letting people face the consequences of their actions. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to enable bad behavior. My son used my grief as his profit center. He turned my pain into his performance. And when given the choice between letting him continue or stopping him publicly, I chose the option that protected the most people. Even if one of those people was him. Because prison, as harsh as it is, stopped Brandon from destroying more lives. It forced him to face what he'd done. It gave him time to hopefully, maybe, become the person I once thought he was. I don't know if he'll change. Prison statistics suggest he probably won't. But at least while he's there, he can't hurt anyone else. And that, I've decided, is the greatest gift I could give to the strangers who trusted him. Protection from a predator who wore my son's face. Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and share your story in the comments.